RPG Horror Stories. This might read a little like a rant, but only because I'm still frustrated. Due to drama and infighting in my group, I decided to try for a new group because I was very much becoming disenchanted with the game. There was a lot of DM controlling player decisions, long novel-length backstories that needed to be incorporated, one player that had to bone anything that moved, and a demand to make the next Critical Role podcast. I signed up for an AL table in the city, and instead of getting a breath of fresh air, I lost interest in the game completely. We had a few cancellations, so there was only 3 of us plus the DM. Another table had a heap of cancellations, so they ended up joining our tables together. Our DM had a player character to spare, so the other DM stepped up to the head of the table. There were 6 players all up, a barbarian, a ranger, a fighter, a cleric and a bard. I was playing a wizard. Now, a side note. I like to mix up the character stats to fit the character's backstory so I can roleplay better. I don't have extensive backstories. This one had a father who was a priest and siblings who went off to cleric school, but my PC found a book and went to be a wizard instead. Her family said, "Take this stick, it's dangerous out there." That's it. So I had intelligence as my biggest stat, point by system, then balanced wisdom and con for my next 2, because she would have some cleric heritage and survival skills. The DM went off at me for this. It was clear he was a by-the-book player, which is usually fine, but argued that not having con as my next highest stat would make me the first to die. When I explained it was how I played the character for backstory reasons, he basically said my backstory didn't mean shit and I needed to change the stats. I didn't. I also didn't die at any point. He said he wasn't using backstories and I said he didn't have to. I was just playing them this way. This just caused him to get confused. Now, because we had a wide range of tanks and casters, and tanky casters, I put down a lot of utility cantrips. I had 1 cantrip to attack, and plenty of damage-orientated spells, but being level 1 I was saving my slots. This was the next cause of offense. Again, I needed more damage spells and was told I had to be more selective about my spells or I would have no defense when combat started. I spammed my 1 attack cantrip and stayed out of the way for the tanks to attack because I was playing strategically. This got worse, however. The DM derailed the campaign to create a side quest where I could pick up another cantrip and complained the whole time about doing it. I took the cantrip, which broke AL rules, and I never used it. Other details included sending the barbarian, with negative intelligence, into an arcane library, and ignoring everyone's suggestions that I should investigate. There were no enemies or traps in the room. Arguing about how my utility spells worked when I had the book right in front of me. I suggested Unseen Servant to check a room for traps. The DM said that was stupid, until the other PCs agreed and I sent him in. I said his name was Gerald and his one desire was to check the room and file the meaning of his creation. The DM cut me off and said simply, "The servant goes into the room and instantly dies." When the game finished up, the others were talking about what a great game it was and how fun the game was. I just pocketed my sheet, then went home and logged out of all of my D&D groups. I'm not in the mood to play anytime soon. This is my first post to RPG Horror Stories and Reddit as a whole, so apologies if my formatting or anything is a little off. I figure that an appropriate first post would be my first official Pathfinder campaign I ever ran. Now, I'm a bit inexperienced as both player and GM. Before running this campaign, I had only played in 3 games before, and the previous campaign was more of a sandbox-style adventure to get my group acquainted with my homebrew setting while I prepped the actual campaign I had planned. This campaign was inspired by The Witcher, featuring the players as members of a guild of monster slayers. It was a high-powered campaign, with the players having Gestalt levels, and I even allowed use of third-party materials. The only relevant party member to this story was using spheres of power. On its own, I didn't mind spheres, but this particular player, the titular incantor, is a bit of a min-maxer, and Spheres facilitates that quite well. In summary, for those who don't know, Spheres of Power basically hybridizes classic class-based systems with that of classless ones. There are classes to choose from with certain restrictions on what you can and can't do, but other than that you get to pretty freely choose what sorts of abilities you get. The beginning of this campaign saw the players forced to team up to take on a threat they could never handle alone. A proper army of goblins had moved in near a town in the hills, and the locals were understandably perturbed by their presence. They numbered approximately 400 strong and were crowded together in a valley a few hours' ride by horse from the town. I expected this part of the campaign to last at least 3 sessions, as there was certainly no way that even a party of 4 Gestalt PCs could just charge into a goblin town and expect to survive, so I was pushing them to act smart and utilize either stealth to find their leader, divide and conquer, set up traps, or some combination of those things or their own idea entirely. The Incantor decided the best course of action was to attack head-on with little to no preparation in advance. There was a decent amount of strategy put forward. The Incantor had another PC open a portal to a pocket dimension which served as a bottleneck to restrict how many goblins could be threatening him at once. The town was pretty densely packed, the goblins practically living on top of one another like a swarm of rats. This ended up being the perfect scenario for the Incantor's only offensive spell, a roughly 100-foot line which averaged about 10 damage, more than most goblins can survive. Within about 3 rounds, by using this method, he had single-handedly killed almost half of the goblin town's population, including not just soldiers, but indeed women and children among them. But hey, they're only goblins, right? It turned out that the reason so many goblins had convened in one place was due to the presence of a greater Barghest who was ready to ascend to godhood. He ended up giving the party, Incantor included, a reason to fall back and live to fight another day, but he too was a short-lived encounter as the party later tricked a great red Wyrm into destroying the remainder of the town, Barghest included, when the party rogue discovered a red dragon egg inside of the Barghest's shrine. I'm not sure that this counts as a horror story or just GM incompetence, but I really felt like this guy took advantage of the system. I was skeptical of Spheres of Power, but when he was first describing it to me, he suggested it was much more balanced to Pathfinder and other third-party materials than it really was. It was a learning experience for me. The campaign ended up being unexpectedly cancelled after that due to a combination of work-related stress as well as outright disrespectful behavior from the Incantor's player IRL, but that's an unrelated story. Hey! First post here and all that jazz. This is a pretty short little story about the time I was the, rather mild, horror of the story. For a little background, my table has been playing together for a few years now. We have done Curse of Strahd, Tomb of Annihilation and a few homebrew campaigns together. We play 5e, and the DM is my longtime boyfriend. I am the most experienced player at the table as I used to play with my dad and sisters while growing up, so my blunder here is even more funny, to us at least. We are playing Waterdeep's Dragon Heist into Storm King's Thunder. At the time of this story we were about level 6 or 7. My character, a tiefling wizard, is the youngest character in the party, and while she is smart she makes rash decisions sometimes, due to her age. We were traveling via airship when we are assaulted by manticores. We all jump into action and defend the ship. As the tides turn in our favor, one of them decides to attack the underside of the ship. So my character decides, since she can fly/feather fall, and it was already injured, she could win the fight by jumping off the edge of the ship and blasting the manticore with lightning, then float safely to the ground, before moving to return to the ship. As she lands on the ground, tribesmen who were hidden from us move into ambush and kidnap her, since their fight wasn't very quiet. Now, I'm playing a wizard, I have like 30 HP. I try to talk my way out but end up failing. No worries, that's the game. My party, realizing that I hadn't contacted them, know something is up and follow my trajectory. A fight breaks out, and while we decimate most of them, we were already spent from the previous encounter and end up being beaten. As the DM says, unconsciousness takes you all. And that's where we will stop for tonight. I just couldn't help it. I was so mad at myself for poor decisions, and the situation that I snapped my pencil in half, slammed my book shut and stood up from the table. Everyone stopped, and then the questions of "Are you okay? You don't seem okay" come rolling in, and I just excuse myself since I've already caused a scene. I came back a few minutes later and they're all laughing. Holy shit, giggle goose, that was both terrifying and badass. Are you feeling better now? Thankfully they all forgave me for my outburst, but I never felt more like that guy than that moment. So we included a new person in the first campaign I ever joined, a succession war. I knew the guy, and later learned he enjoyed power gaming to the point of becoming unkillable, as well as enjoying making homebrew content. I could make most of his character ideas into memorable boss battles that challenge player characters. Unfortunately, he was a player character. He didn't want any of the canon races, sub-races, classes, subclasses, or backgrounds. Most of us, including the GM, were new. We were so happy about getting a new member that we didn't care. So he made his custom race, having the blood of all elementals. This meant he was good at magic. His backstory was being the child of two of the country's magic researchers, spending his youth in a room filled with books of arcane knowledge. This meant he was good at magic, and he had a small magic device. This device was the equivalent of the level 7 spell Reverse Gravity with unlimited uses. His class was similar to Wizard, but he could choose to cast spells at lower levels, alter spells, and learn new spells through an Arcana check. This class meant good at magic, better than any other magic class. See a pattern yet? He apparently once told the GM he was something like a god of magic, which the GM instantly shot down. As a druid, I used to be the magic guy, but he was far better. The character could do things like cast heat metal without knowing the spell. He would have become better at magic than the level 20 BBEG wizard if the campaign dragged on too long. When GM mentioned that the character was no longer canon, the player agreed this was fair. He is a decent guy, but he severely hurt the power balance in the game. Morals of the story: only homebrew as a last resort and never to power game. Your character should feel like they belong in the world, and make sure your character would not make for an ideal villain. I once was in a campaign with some friends and we were playing fine for the first few sessions, and then a new person, the best friend of the GM, and started at level 3 while we were at level 2, and he was a chaotic evil sorcerer that hated paladins, and guess what, I was a lawful good paladin of the god that the character hated. I joined a tournament and the sorcerer joined also, and I won the tournament, and when I won he then attacked me again and told the party he will pay them if he attacked me, and the GM allowed it, and I didn't fight back and they were arrested, and I confronted the sorcerer about it and he said, I will not stop trying to kill you because I hate you. So I told him that let's end this in a duel, and I defeated him because my AC was high and the player thought that I just had a sword, but I also had a bow and was skilled in it. Thank you, good rolls on my dex, and I killed the PC. The very next week the player shows up with a chaotic evil cleric of some orc god, and he hates paladins and was aggressive against my character from the get-go. The good thing was the campaign ended the next session because of the GM has personal stuff. The player said he only played evil characters because he can't be evil in real life.